got another 1969 Deluxe Reverb in. And for the guy who was really harsh to me in the comments yesterday because I initially called that other 69 a 79, yeah, they're very much silver panel amps, the 69s. And I was thrown off by the fact that the speaker had a code which ended in 79, and coincidentally, so did ink stamp in the chassis. And going from the transformers, they're just going to say 9, whether they're 69 or 79. And I pretty quickly realized it was a 69, and that's why the video was edited that way. And if I was trying to appear perfect to the world, I would have redone the video and started saying 69 from the get-go. I'm really not trying to be always right. It's part of the fun is the process of discovery. You know, when you get in a silver panel amp with the 9 at the end, it could be a 79 or a 69. You have to almost have to look inside. Though, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video yesterday, I was puzzled by the 79 code on the speaker versus the cleats holding the baffle in place, which stopped in 71 or 72. I'm not sure if there was a known exact cutoff time for that transition. I'm sure someone out there knows. But anyway, this 69 comes in. I've did some work to this. Oh, how many years ago? This was done December of 20, so not that long ago. See, I could have edited that out and made it look like I remembered everything. And when this came in, I shortened the CBS spaghetti wiring, I cleaned some pots, cleaned out some DC on the board. I'm reading over my shoulder at the repair tag. Had a bad reverb pot and incorrect value treble pots. I remember this amp. Yeah, it had noisy reverb pot, and it had 10% taper treble pots. They have the correct J tapers now. And I redid the chassis grounds directly to the chassis, as opposed to the mounting hardware, and had a dead old Utah speaker, and I put in a G12C, which you'll get to hear in a little bit, which will be great because I spoke to the owner yesterday on that other 69, and I recommended the G12C. So he'll get to hear a very similar amp when this is done through the G12C, though his will probably be here ready for that amp in the next day or two. Anyway, this amp previously had the output transformer replaced, not by me. Previously it had the filter caps changed out, not by me, though whoever did it did a good job. There's silicone there. I'm not crazy about some of the cosmetics of it, but that's just cosmetics. Notice on the 69, they still had the 10K and 10K. Later ones, they moved to a 2.2 and a 10K. Let's look inside. All right, if you compare the wiring in here to yesterday's, you'll see that the same thin wire used in 69, and that there's a lot less of it. I shortened almost all the connections and made sure, especially here between the reverb and vibrato circuit tubes, that wasn't going to be any crosstalk. Got everything really shorter in the PI, generally neatened up. These 1 watt metal film resistors were not my work. They're fine. They look really tiny, but they're rated for much more voltage and current than is present in the phase inverter. But the amp says it is. The owner says the amp is dropping in and out of volume, and I have not confirmed that yet, and we will. But I went through this amp before I started this video just to see if I could find any really likely suspects. And there are the new pots that I put in last time. And these caps here were done by the guy who did the recap before. This is not my work, but it's good work. I'm suspicious of this resistor right here. This 47 ohm resistor in the phase inverter from where the negative feedback comes into ground. It's got some discoloration to it. It's losing the ink, and it's a half watt or 1 watt, can't tell, it depends on the manufacturer, carbon film, and it really shouldn't have any real heat there, but there's just some discoloration there. Sorry, I almost dropped things, which is unusual. So I'm going to power this up and see if I can get the volume drop to happen. If it's happening on both channels. If it's happening on both channels, that really helps. And I suspect that that might be the issue. We'll find out. Just because something looks funky doesn't mean it is funky. But this amp, as you can tell, has a lot of original components left. And any one of those old carbon films from 1969, sorry, carbon composites from 1969 could be causing problems. Let's see what it sounds like. Well, frustratingly, I've not been able to find any problem with the amp yet, but it's only been on about 20 minutes at this point. There was a gap between when I recorded what you saw before and this. We'll let the amp warm up, see if I could find anything obvious to show you guys. Both channels are fine. And that was the normal channel. Let's go to the vibrato channel. There's a little bit of a ringing that comes in once in a while. It goes away. And I can't tie it to either channel in particular yet. I can't really play it too high a volume right now because my wife is on a Zoom upstairs. Some noise on that grid there, but that's typical on an unshielded grid. I think the oscillation or the squeal I was getting, the whine, was probably just caused by the fact that this normal channel had not been used in a while. And it went away the more I plugged into and out of. Oh, there it is again. I don't know if you can hear it. All right, there's a high-pitched whine there, and it's independent of the channels being used. And as soon as I touched the chassis, it went away. Let's see if I pull V5, which is the mixer tube. It needs to be cleaned. It's an old Amperex in there. And I pull V1, so there'll be no signal going to the phase inverter input from either channel. Let's see if that whine comes back. There's a little bit of noise coming through the speaker when I take the shield off the phase inverter tube. It's just ever so slightly microphonic. Let me put this in standby and see what the tube is. It's an old RCA 12AT7. Put this carefully to the side. It may just need to be cleaned, but I'm wondering if it's been oscillating. And when it oscillates, it can draw a lot more current than it should. And that might be why this resistor has lost some of its color bands and has a slight bit of darkening right there. It's hard to see what's real and what's a shadow in the video, but to the eye, it's pretty apparent. So let's see what AT70's got in the reverb driver. Ooh, that gets warm. Let me get a paper towel. Reverb drivers are a very abused 12AT7 in Fenders. It's another RCA. So I'm going to put this one into the phase inverter spot and see how it behaves as far as microphonics and or that whine. And while I can't do a high volume test right now, just theorizing if that RCA tube that's out of the amp right now was causing oscillation. It could just be from poor pin to metal contact in the socket. That could be drawing excessive current here. It could be causing that squeal. Squeal and oscillation can happen at frequencies above what we can hear. And that could eventually lead to enough of an issue in the phase inverter, especially at higher volumes, that the sound would cut in and out because the grids can do weird things. With a new phase inverter, I'm not hearing as much noise. There's a little bit of microphonics, but let me plug back into the amp. See how it sounds with that one. Oh, doesn't sound at all with that one. Wow, you pulled V5 and V1. Duh. See, I could have edited that out to make myself look perfect. I have no time for trying to appear perfect. The end result is the important thing. You know, you don't have to walk in the room and say, oh, that little bit of pink lint means that she was at Piccadilly Circus, whatever, Sherlock. You just have to end up at the same place. Let's put V5 back. And put in standby so you don't hear a big noise. And let me put my little block back so the chassis stays more or less level. All right, now while I could wait just to see if that oscillation randomly comes back, I'm going to actually attach this to a scope. You don't see me using the scope a lot in these videos because, frankly, it's pretty boring. And if you tune into a YouTube video and there's a 1K sine wave for 10 minutes, I mean, you'll be Chewbacca in Cloud City, man. You're going to change the hell out of that channel. So let me pause this and get that set up. And if I see anything of interest, I'll report back. Well, I had this thing scoped for about 30 minutes, hitting it with various signals and measuring all over the place, and everything is fine, and the bias is fine. And that was with this RCA out. So in a little bit, we're going to clean the pins on this RCA, because it can just be poor contact between the metal of the pin and the metal of the tube socket. And I'll clean both those RCAs, and I'll clean both those tube sockets. I'll show that. Right now, I have a theory that there was oscillation caused by that tube, and that oscillation was making this resistor get too hot, which would explain why the color bands on it are partially missing, and it's got a little ring of dark right here where you can't really see it on the camera. It looks just like a shadow, but it's actually in the paint. And if that resistor is getting too hot and cutting out, you will lose output. And though I have not gotten the amp to lose output. So I'm going to swap that out before we do anything else. If I'm right, it's an easy fix. If I'm wrong, I'm replacing one modern resistor with another one, so there'll be no harm, no foul, and it will at least eliminate a variable. Whoever did this before did some nice little expansion joint leads on the resistor, because on these horizontally mounted resistors and fenders, the board can move and put stress on those joints. So I'm going to use this resistor as a template for the new one. And it's just a matter of little wavy bits. And there are specific tools for that, which I don't have because they're relatively expensive. And I'm just going to do this with this. A little bit hard to do on camera, of course. I'm just using the rounded barrel of this small screwdriver. And that will do very nicely. So I'll snip off the bits that I don't need. And if this were an otherwise stock Fender, early 60s, mid 60s, early 70s, whatever, I would do it a little bit more like it was original, with a carbon comp for this and all that. But since this amp has had quite a bit of work done already, I'm going to go with this 1 watt carbon film with this quick and dirty expansion joint, and it should work just fine. Get this in there. Sometimes old solder doesn't want to reflow, like right there. That's because the flux is all dissipated out of it. Flux does a couple of things. It cleans off metals, so you get good metal to metal contact, and it makes solder flow a lot more smoothly and reliably. So I got that one in there. I'm going to tuck the other side down a bit better. Don't need to add too much, just enough to get some fresh flux into the mix. It makes all the solder do its thing look much better. That's a tricky one to do. The camera is right where my right hand wants to be. And there's old leads down in there that were never removed by a previous tech. But anyway, I'm going to neaten that up a little bit. It got a little bit bent in that process, which is no big deal. It's supposed to bend. I like it to look a bit better than that. There we go. All right. Now, because those loops, if this board continues to move, there won't be the stress on these joints. That 47 ohm resistor should stay 47 ohms for a very long time. Let me flip this chassis over. We're going to do some cleaning. All right. This socket here, V6, is the phase inverter. That's where all the issues are. And the rest of the amp is behaving well enough that I'm not too concerned about the other sockets. But I'm going to take each one of these RCA 12AT7s and hit the pins with some deoxit. Just a little bit. Now, if I had a copper wire sponge or something, or some really fine grained steel wool, I could just move that in and out of that. And that will clean and burnish the surfaces. But I can also take these pins which have deoxit on them and put the tube in and out of the socket a few times, which will have some metal to metal abrasion, and it will move some deoxit onto those tube pin receivers in the socket as well. But deoxit is conductive. We don't want to leave it on those pins. We're going to use it temporarily, and then we're going to flush the deoxit off with some isopropyl alcohol, which will displace all the deoxit, and then evaporate. And I'm making sure not to get deoxit or alcohol on the print of the tubes, which say RCA. Wipe off the excess now on the tube. Let that air dry. Same for the second one. All right. Still got that little bit of RCA on there, but the 12AT7 is clear. All right, so now I'm going to take some paper towel and put it on the other side. And there are probably real fancy ways to do this with syringes and stuff. But I find that just stirring the alcohol more or less with a cheap brush gets it where I want it to be. Get a little bit more in there. I want to flush it out really well. Then I want to turn this chassis upside down and let all that stuff drip out. So it all flows down out of the socket rather than deeper into the socket. Now doing that, we'll put some alcohol here. So I have to wait till all that evaporates before I apply any power. I get this bit of wet paper towel out of the way. And then I will use a little bit of paper towel like this, wad it up, stick it in the tube socket, and try to kind of wick stuff out. It's running fairly clean, just got a little bit of orange. That's probably just old flux, as opposed to some amps where you do that and it comes out like a chain smoker's lung. Yeah, just little tiny bits of orange. But all that stuff can be between tube pins and the metal contacts. So it's good to get that clean. Like I said, that isopropyl will flush all that deoxide out, so we shouldn't have any real issues with that. Sorry about some of the S's and the SH's. I've got a dental thing I'm about to get fixed. It's been a real problem. But if that's the biggest problem I've had during the time of COVID, I'm a very lucky man, which I am. All right, so I'm going to pause this here and let some time pass, and then we'll see if that oscillation is gone. But I think the amp's going to be very healthy. All right, all seems to be very, very well. Of course, I'm going to have to let this run for at least another hour or two to make sure that there's nothing I've missed. This whole time I've been using its speaker cable and speaker with an extension. It's about 8 or 10 feet to the left of the amp, but I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a problem with its speaker or its old 1969 speaker wire and plug. And I bent and manipulated every inch of that cable just to make sure there wasn't a loss of connection there when I was doing my initial troubleshooting. So I've got the vibrato on to make sure it works. It does, works very well. I'll verify the reverb when I put it all back together, but the owner said it was working fine. I have no reason to doubt it. And all that squeal is gone. Oh, it just had a tube shield shoot off when I tapped it. Microphonics are gone. Get those tube shields back on real quick. And then test normal channel, which is where I first heard some of that oscillation. So here's the normal channel, which he was not using, but sounds very good. So I think I will reunite this with this cabinet and reverb tank and speaker, do a quick test there, and not fully button it up, but leave it running. Once it's in the cabinet and there's no airspace up here, sometimes things can get hot. So if there's anything I've missed, that might make it show up. I never want to rush these off my bench, but neither do I want to spend so much time on everything that the owner gets an artificially high repair bill. Some things really are as simple as just cleaning some tubes and changing out one 10-cent resistor. So let's hope this is that case. All right, now I'm going to leave it running on a looper pedal for
for about an hour to see if there's any heat issues. But one thing I did discover was that the RCA 12AT7 that used to be the phase inverter, which is currently in the Reverb driver, is very weak. So here's a little bit of the loop. That's for the Reverb on 8. That should be about the Reverb on 4. It's just a very weak AT7. So I'll be changing that out. No big deal. I'll order one. I can get a JAN 12AT7 for like 20 bucks. So I'm just going to let this loop run for as long as I can stand to listen to it. See, the volume's almost at 3, treble's almost at 6, basses at 5.5, reverb off because I don't need it for this. I've turned it down so I can talk over it. It's been a little bit over an hour. You might be able to tell by the change in light. And it's had no issues whatsoever. So I take great joy in stopping this infernal loop. That's enough of that. I think the amp's healthy now. I think the problem was that AT7 that was in the phase inverter that showed up as weak when I put it there in the Reverb driver was causing oscillation. That oscillation was causing that 47R resistor, the 47 ohm resistor in the last bit of the phase inverter, the ground connection, to get too hot and cut in and out, which would explain why the signal was going in and out for the owner. And I have a Philips JAN 12AT7 on order. With shipping, it came to just under $30, a very good investment for this amp. So once it arrives, I'll button this up and we'll do a real video with no more hollies for a bit. Though, when the mood strikes,